So, look at me, I'm starting on time with no technical issues so far. How's that? Unusual for me. We've only got one person in the chat so far, and that's Stephen. G'day, Stephen. Yeah. Congrats on the smooth start. Thank you, Stephen. We haven't seen the waiting room screen in a while, have we? Yeah. Well, g'day, Will James. Good to see you on the stream. While we're waiting for people to join, I'll answer the obvious question that I'm sure I'll get asked again later on, and I'll answer again later on, but where did my Flinders Street sign go? It's gone a few metres over there. The whole house is an absolute mess at the moment, and you can only see a small fraction of that mess behind me, because the house is getting renovated. So until half an hour ago, my computer and everything had plastic and tarp, drop sheets, whatever you want to call them, over the computer to minimise the amount of dust that got on it. Yeah, so if you saw, what, 2 live streams ago, so 4 weeks ago, the wall behind me was pure white and it was looking nice and fresh and new, and that's because it was. So why is it not looking that way right now? It's not looking that way because on the other side of that wall is the bathroom. Now, of course, getting renovations done, you do the bathrooms. 100-plus-year-old house. When it was built, 1920, this house was built. The builders accidentally put a brick through the wall from the other side, and yeah, then cracked another bit of plaster. So yeah, the wall had to, the plaster of the wall had to get completely pulled down, the fresh plaster. And yeah, Mum was surprisingly not bothered by it, which I'm surprised. She went through a lot of, what shall we say, effort, heartache to get that wall done, and to see it just, yeah, the brick through the wall was quite something. So yeah, the builders said that they would cop that to, redo that wall. So that's good. But yeah, so the whole wall got pulled down, and I didn't realise on the day that that's what was happening. I just came home and the wall was stripped of its plaster. But there was just dust everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Yeah, and the reason why that sucks is, okay, you get its dust everywhere, you got to clean up the dust, whatever. The biggest reason why it sucks is I left my computer running. Now, yeah, it wasn't doing anything, but it's idling. It's still, the fans are running, pulling air through it. Now, my computer is an iMac. And if you don't know IMAX, you might say, oh, well, okay, you've got to dust out the inside, no big deal, you've got to do that on computers every few years. Maybe it's time for it anyway. If you know IMAX, you know that step one to any repair or internal dusting is cut the screen off. Yes, I said cut the screen off. You need a special tool to cut the adhesive that the screen... Why did Apple design it like that? The previous design had magnets and it worked well. I know why they did it. They did it to make it look better. And yeah. I love and I hate Apple. So if, yeah. I've got no reason to cut it open at the moment because, as a lot of you would know, I repaired it about a year ago. So, yeah, that sucks, but oh well. What can you do? Anyway, we've got Dark Frosty as well in the chat, who's just appeared while I was rambling on. And he says, hey Floyd, it was my 23rd birthday on Wednesday. Happy birthday, mate. I don't know what else to say. It's 23, cool. It's not a very special birthday, I don't think. But, you know, that's most birthdays in life, so nothing wrong with that. Anyway, I don't have a lot of people tonight. Stephen says that Oscar has told him he's busy, and I've also had an apologies from Matt K183. And so, yeah, we'll get into it shortly. Dark Frosty says, yeah, I remember you had a lot of trouble with that computer. I think you used magnets to hold up the screen. No, I used suction cups to help hold the screen while I cut the adhesive and disconnected the power and data cords. But the main issue that I had with it was the GPU was failing, which would cause the computer to randomly shut down sometimes. And GPU is soldered to the logic board, so that required a full logic board replacement. Apple said they couldn't do it, so I said, screw you, I'll do it. And it was a saga. And Roderick has just popped in the chat. Said, I gambled you would start 5 minutes late, and you didn't. I have just left an interesting Q&A still in progress after a great aviation talk. Right, yes, I started 5 minutes early tonight. Who would have known? Even I thought I was going to be late tonight because I had to, well, didn't have to, but I said I would drop my sister off in St Kilda tonight. So, you know, it takes time to get there and back. Anyway, let's see. Let's go to screen capture. There we go. While I read some comments, have a look at this list down here and see if there's anything in particular you'd like me to edit the photos from. If not, I will pick something. So Stephen says, I would say so because the subject of this stream is not as interesting for most viewers, being rail fans. Then again, the model train stream had a lot of members from Oscar's Discord server too. Text are too small to read, says Rod. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see, what have I got here? In terms of like the topic, I mean, yeah, I guess it's less popular than models, but I still would have thought it would attract a few people. Doesn't matter, small stream's a good stream. So Stephen would say either Newport Open Day or Tate official relaunch. Okay. We've got that. Hang on, where is it? Oh, Steam. Okay, there we go. I'm blind. Yeah, you know what? I said that I would. I told Noah Clancy that I would be sending these photos ages ago, and I still haven't. So let's go for the edit, and then we can finally send it to him months late. Oh well, I got caught up in uni and shit. Anyway, I didn't take a whole lot of photos, considering it was over 3 days, only 357. And some of you would be going, yeah, only 357. But even so, like you can see, a huge majority of them were just taken on within the space of an hour of each other. And if you hear strange noises in the background, it's the dog. He's just lying down beside me. Okay, so yeah, a few of you would have seen me at the Steam Rail Open Day. Yeah, I was a photographer for part of the time. I was on the Tates part of the time, and I was on the bus the other part of the time. So this is actually a good example of an event that I haven't really sorted. So, you know, I did 2 live streams ago, I talked about how I sort photos. This is an example of, I haven't sorted it, but I want to edit. Yeah, I'm using Lightroom. Didn't mention that. So I'm not going to mention any specific keyboard shortcuts or anything like that unless you ask me how I did something or other. So anyway, I've got dust on my keyboard as well, and it's yuck. So just scrolling through briefly. Okay, so we've got this photo, this photo, this photo. So what I'm sort of looking for is, does it look like this photo has potential? And if I'm honest, it doesn't really look like it. And this one, there's slight potential. Wait for it to load. We'll give this a try. Okay, so this is the bulk of my editing, is these presets down here. If you've got Lightroom, you can create your own presets or buy some from other people. I've had one person buy these presets from me. I sort of intend them to be a future Patreon reward, but if anyone particularly wants them in the meantime, then I don't know, $30, something like that. So, yeah, they're all named sort of based on locations. So I think Stations After Sunset. Now I'm not seeing a lot of potential. Like, it looks okay, but it's nothing special. So what these presets essentially do is they just sort of play around a little bit with the like contrast and all of these different stuff, which I can explain on a better photo. So let's go back to the grid. So sometimes I will just scroll through out here and look for something interesting. So we've got this burner here. That Matt is playing around with. And I was trying to get photos of the sparks and whatnot, but also trying to get a good picture of like someone, like that's sort of what I was going for, is you can see, you know, Matt is shoveling in a shovel full of coal into the burner, but there's not a lot of sparks coming out the chimney, so I've got better photos like, there's a few sparks coming out there, but it wasn't like, yeah, look at that. If only we could combine those sparks with the glowing reflection on Matt. So I'm just sort of going through these relatively quickly, just seeing like if any sort of jump out to me. None have really jumped out so far. What's that one? That's not bad, but no. Starting to glow. A lot of this sort of photo, when I'm actually trying to take it, is just trial and error. I just take a whole bunch of photos and hope that one of them I'll get what I want. Sparks seem to happen just after the coal's been shoved in, so that. Sometimes I'll come across a photo like this where it's, you know, there's not many sparks coming out, so it's not quite what I was after, but Paul's making a funny face, so I'm going to rate that a 2. And if you remember from last 4 weeks ago, sorry, 2 means probably not going to publish it, but it's worth keeping around. And that's not a bad one to just keep around. But I'm still just going like, okay, yeah, there's a... Yeah, if I had a better angle on that, it could have been good. Okay, so I didn't really get what I wanted from that. Moving on and looking at some comments while I'm here. Rod commenting about birthdays. After 21, the next landmark birthday is 25. That's when hire car companies ease restrictions. 26 is when Eurail Pass stops selling youth passes. Hello Oscar, small audience tonight. Yes. And Stephen says, that reminds me, Floyd, if you ever get around to sending me your video of me moving the wheel set at the top of Rubicon Tramway, that would be great. Oh yes, yes, I'll do that. Rod's saying try the right hand half of the first one. Not exactly sure what you mean. Hello Stolen Subways and hello CCT Mitch. Anyway, so it looks like I've already edited this one. This could be a good one to just explain what it did. So obviously there's sort of 3 similar photos and I've picked that one, so I'm going to label those 2 as 1. And then we're going to go into the develop module. Okay, let's explain what all of this does. So I'll start off with a small tip, and that is, see how the file name is .arw? That's the Sony RAW file type. Different camera manufacturers have different file extensions for their RAW type. So what do I even mean by RAW? I just mean so when, how do I describe it? In digital photography, you have probably heard of the JPEG, the humble JPEG. That is a file format, and it's compressed. Now, what does that even mean? Why would you want compression? So think about like what is a digital photo in its most basic form. How does a digital camera even work? Well, I'm trying to think whether I should break out the good old Word document. I think we might. Give me a minute. Whoa. Okay, let's go here. Let's break out the old Word document for giving ourselves a nice drawing. Okay, back to screen capture. So, this is essentially what your a camera sensor looks like on a microscopic level. It looks like this and is divided up into pixels, right? Now, you might think that, okay, you know, that's a pixel, that's a pixel, that's a pixel. No. No, that's a sub-pixel. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, well, you know, hopefully, that colour light can be represented to our eyes with a combination of red, green and blue. So essentially in each of these photo sites, we call it, there is a resistor, really. It's a bit of a photoresistor, you'd call it. It's a piece of electronics that varies the resistance and essentially varies its output voltage or signal or whatever you want to call it, depending on how much light is received. Now, individually, these photoreceptors, photosites, whatever you want to call them, they can't tell red, green or blue. They can just tell bright versus not bright. So what we do is we get some of these squares and we colour them. We colour one red, one green, and one blue. Actually, I'm going to draw it here, and you'll see why in a sec. And so you might think, okay, cool, but you know, we've only got 3 colours and, you know, it'd be kind of convenient if we could make it 4 because then it, you know, fits nicely. You're right. So actually, the human brain is way more sensitive to green light. It's about twice as sensitive to green light as it is to red and blue. So let's change to the better green. So we coloured this one green. Now we've got twice as much green gathering light as we do red, green and blue. So the 4 of these subpixels together, that makes up a full pixel. And now we sort of repeat that. So, you know, you would have green here, not going to bother colouring in full, maybe be a bit nicer than that. And then alternate, so we've got red here, we'd have red here, and blue here. And, you know, that goes on for the entire camera sensor. So this is what we call a Bayer filter, B-E-Y-E-R. How cool is that? So now we think about that and we think, okay, so what the camera is actually sort of reading is how bright is this? How bright is this? How bright is that? How bright is that? How bright is this? Every single subpixel, and then it's combining them to say, okay, pixels, if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, my brilliant drawing, 6, 7, 8, etc. It says, okay, subpixels 1, 2, 5 and 6, that creates a full pixel. Same with 3, 4, 7 and 8. So, yeah, but you can imagine that depending on how many different variations, and it's usually 14-bit, which means 2 to the power of 14, which let's quickly figure that out. What is it, 2 to the power of 14? So yeah, a modern camera sensor can see for each thing it can see, about 16,000 different light variations. So now let's times that by, my camera is 24 megapixels, so that's 24 times 10 to the 6. So that is how many pieces of information the camera has to store. And that's just the color data, that's nothing else. So you can imagine that that's a big number. We maybe want to not store it like that. So, or maybe we do. And essentially, when we're storing every single value, that's called a raw photo, or almost every single value, we still call it a raw. So that's all well and good. So we use JPEGs to compress the image, and that just means that we're sort of saying that, like, oh, you know, if we've got some picture like this is a brilliant photograph, I am well aware, and we've got some green grass here, trust me, that's grass. We've got some blue sky, you know, we'll put a yellow sun in here. Look at my brilliant photo drawing skills. So we can sort of, instead of storing blue for every single, you know, bit of sky, we can just say the sky is blue, the grass is green, the sun is yellow. And, you know, that's way less information than storing this bit is blue, this bit is also blue, this bit is also blue, this bit is, etc. So, you know, a little bit more complicated than that, but you get the idea. So by compressing the image, we do lose a bit of data because the sky isn't just one singular colour of blue, it's a gradient. But, you know, it's not a bad compromise. Let's go back. So, raw photos gives you more data to work with, and that's good when you're trying to process photos. If you're just trying to share the photo, it probably won't make a big difference. But you'll certainly notice the difference if you get into editing. So, I'm going to talk about what these things do. In fact, I'm just going to go up to here and then I'm going to look at some comments. So starting at the very top, we've got a histogram, and that is really just a bar chart essentially, if you know bar chart. So it's sort of saying, okay, we're starting at 0 brightness and then we're going up to 100% brightness over this end of the chart, or histogram I should say. And then how tall the peak is, that's how many of that brightness of pixel do we have. So if we've got, you know, what's that, about 5-10% brightness, something like that, how many pixels? We've got quite a few at that level, and that makes sense, you know. We've got lots of dark areas here, and then we can sort of see the general shape that, yeah, we've got a peak over here, so yep, that makes sense. We've got a lot of sky here, and we've got a few sort of in-betweens, but it can give you a good idea of the overall brightness of the image. Now, you want that to be roughly even, but maybe skewed to one side or the other depending on what exactly you want to do, the look of your photo, and it's just a way of confirming that what you think that you see on your screen is actually what is truly going on, because your screen can sometimes play tricks on you. Treatment, colour versus black and white, that's fairly obvious. I should just say that these are a few like masking, red eye correction, spot removal. We'll go through that a bit later, I think. Treatment of colour versus black and white, that's pretty obvious. So profile, you can choose a few different options. It's basically saying, remember where all of that, the file, a raw photo that comes out of the camera, we can just tell the brightness level of each individual subpixel, but you know, exactly how each camera responds can be different, and colour is as much made up by the brain than it is the eyes. So if you think of the eyes like the camera sensor, in that, you know, it's picking up and then it's feeding the information back to the brain, and the brain is what actually creates the image. So yeah, it's really just sort of getting everything to a consistent starting point. That's the simple answer. Getting everything from different cameras and whatever, and you know, it's a starting point. Adobe Color is fairly standard, although you can choose other stuff if you want. Or some creators, so I've seen some people create their own. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. Hang on a second. Hi, I'm live streaming. Yeah, so that's a good starting point. Now, white balance is sort of along that same line of things, in that white, I'm sure if you've ever looked at white paints, you'll know that there's no such thing as pure white. Same with light, you know. White is just essentially something that our brain has made up to represent all colours reflecting back at us. So depending on the source of light, exactly what is white can be a little bit more blue, or a little bit more yellow, or a little bit more green, or a little bit more pink, or a combination of the two, or four, I should say. So that's what white balance is doing. It's sort of adjusting for what light source was it taken with, what light source was the photo taken with, or what mixture of light. And if you hear people say make the photo warmer or cooler, that's what they're talking about. I don't see people sort of creatively adjusting the tint very much, but you can do it. It's mainly for corrections. Okay, you can read some comments. Oh, there's actually not that many comments. Just hope you're doing well. Thanks, I'm doing all right. And hello, Albert. Cool, let's continue on. How are we doing for time? Oh gosh, we're 40 minutes in. So, let's keep going. So exposure, that is adjusting the overall brightness of the image, and I'll revert that to what it was normally. In fact, let's go back to here so that I can sort of show you. Actually, no, we'll do this one, and I'll just do something. Give me a sec. I'm going to call this edited, and then we're going to reset. So this is essentially what it comes out of the camera as after Adobe has tried to figure out what it was. So I can look at this and go, okay, how's the white balance? Is it looking okay? Is it looking a bit too warm? Is it looking a bit too cool? Has the camera made the right judgment? I think it's looking all right. So I'd probably bring the exposure up a bit. And then I would look at applying one of these presets, probably like when we're at 2 or something like that, to get the right sort of look. Then make a few further adjustments, like, oh yeah, maybe a bit down. I think I might have darkened the foreground a bit, something like that. So, exposure, the overall brightness or darkness of your photo. Pretty self-explanatory. Contrast, that's sort of the difference between the dark parts and the light parts of the image. So if I was to increase the contrast, you can see that the darker parts get darker and the brighter parts get brighter. But I don't want too much contrast in this image because I'm thinking about like, well, this photo was taken in the early morning and I want it to appear like that. I don't want it to appear like it's been taken at midday. So, soft lighting. Highlights, so that's looking at the sort of brighter parts of the image, and you can see sometimes on this histogram that it lights up sort of the area of brightness that it's affecting. So it's not affecting the absolute brightest parts of the image, but neither is it really affecting the middle. It's sort of, in the 70 to 80% range. So we're looking at the 70 to 80% range, and then we're looking at how bright or dark do we want to just affect those areas. So, probably in this particular photo, we want them to be darkened a little bit so that we can get a bit of colour in the sky. Shadows, similar thing, but obviously it's adjusting the darker, shadowy areas of the image. Whites and blacks, now that's just looking at either extreme. So the whites is sort of just affecting the very brightest parts of the image, and that's it. Can be good for just if there's like reflections often, anything that's really just really bright, it can help. Blacks, again, just the opposite, so it can really sort of help to define like the cracks and the gaps between things that are small. Then we move on to this next section. Texture, that's sort of affecting the contrast levels of the more medium, I'll say. Yeah. It's not affecting things that are too big, and it's not affecting things that are too small. So, you know, we can sort of play around with that. We can decrease the texture and, oh, that looks a bit blurry. Going to the other extreme, that looks a bit yuck. So you're always looking to find a balance. And the more you play around with all these sliders, the more you'll get an idea for what they do, how they affect your image, you know, how you want to use them. Clarity, that's just affecting the finer details. So it can be easy when you're first starting to edit to take these to a bit of an extreme. Be careful, it can look pretty fake. So if that's what you're going for, a fake look, then cool. But if not, then yeah. Dehaze, that's looking at the broader details. So you can see that if I put some dehaze in, then it's really affecting the haziness of the image, would you guess? But you know, that's just the overall larger details. But we like the haze in this particular image, so we're not gonna touch that too much. Vibrance versus saturation. So saturation I'll explain first. It's effectively saying how colourful is the image. Is it a very colourful image, or do you want it to be a little bit more colourful or a little bit less colourful? It's saturating the colours, and it's affecting the whole image, and it's affecting all colours equally. Vibrance does a similar thing to saturation, except that if something was perfectly grey, it would not affect it at all. If it was already pretty saturated, it would affect it quite a bit, and you know, in between it varies. So it's a way of saturating, getting some more pop out of the colours without oversaturating the more grey areas of your image, because you know, there's often a very slight colour cast to things like concrete or asphalt or whatever, and if you push this saturation slider too far, it can start to turn the pavement orange or something like that, and you obviously don't really want that. So that's where the Vibrance slider can come in, because it it doesn't affect the more neutral parts of your image. Tone curve. So there's 4 different tone curves you can play around with, and I'm ignoring that one because it's essentially the same as this one, just with less control. So you can affect the whites, the reds, the greens, or the blues. And effectively, this is another graph. So you'll see it says input and output down here. So along the bottom is input and along the side is output. So if let's reset channel. So you can see a bit of what that did. So by default it's just a straight line, which basically means the input is equal to the output. And what's the input, what's the output? The input is the original image and the output is your final edited image. Or, yeah, so if you've essentially got a brightness of 0% in your original image, at the moment you're saying, yeah, I want to keep it at 0%, but let's say I wanted to brighten it a bit like that. Well, now you see at 0% input, we've got 18% output. Or, is it 18%? No, so it's up to 255. So you know, so we've got a bit, right? A bit of output. So that's sort of brightening up the blacks in the image. But we don't really want that for now. Similarly, you can add a point and you can make it curvy. So here's a simple curve where I've just, this is what you'd call brightening the mids. So you can sort of see the vague outline of the original line. So, you know, it's saying that at the original very darkest parts of the image, we want it to keep it that way. And then sort of slowly increase until we get to the middle where we want the original middle to be quite a bit brighter, but then we want it to tail off so that by the time it gets to the very brightest points of the image, we haven't tried to make the brightest points any brighter or darker. So let's reset. So one way to add a bit of controlled contrast is we add 3 points. So we can add 3 points in like that. And we keep the middle one the same, but we decrease that one a little bit and we increase that one a little bit. And this is sort of what's referred to as an S curve, because you can see it sort of makes an S shape vaguely. I mean, this is a pretty subtle one, but you know, I guess you could get a little bit more extreme. And sometimes you can get really extreme and that just looks disgusting, but yeah, you can see what we're doing is we're saying make the shadows of the image a little bit darker, but keep the mids the same, and then make the highlights a little bit brighter. So we're essentially adding contrast. Yippee! You know, maybe we want to brighten it up a bit now, or you know, we can just. It's always a continual process of going back and forth, seeing what you want to do. Similar thing with the red, green, and blue channels. Now, I've done a bit of adjusting, except you'll notice that these are sort of coloured. This one's got a red corner and this one's got a blue corner, and that's because you're only affecting the red channel. So remember, photo's made up of red, green, and blue, so you're only affecting the red parts, and you're sort of saying, do I want more or less red? So if you put more red in, that's pretty obvious. The image gets more red. If you take away red, the opposite colour to red on the colour wheel is teal. So, yeah, you'll add teal in. Similar thing with green, except it's magenta and green, because magenta is the opposite colour on the colour wheel to green, and blue and yellow. It can be fiddly to get those things right, and I've just done a lot of fiddling, so I know what the fiddling does. Roderick Smith says the blue on the T is losing compared to the black on the stem. Will Vibrance solve that? Yes, Vibrance could be a way to solve that. Although the T's paint scheme is already a bit faded, and I don't really, I mean, this is just a sample edit, but I probably don't want it to be the focus. I don't really want to increase its saturation or whatever, because I don't really want it to be the focus of the image. I want the whole environment to be the focus of the image, and the T is there if you want to go looking for it. but it's the whole atmosphere of the image that I'm looking for. So that's probably not what I want to do. Or if I really wanted to highlight the T, then I could do a bit of local adjustment, but I can show a good example of that later. Cyan, Rod correctly pointed out. I think I said teal before, but you're right, cyan is the correct term. So this is what we call the HSL sliders, hue, saturation and luminance. So now we are splitting up the red, green and blue into further parts of the colour wheel. So we've obviously got red, orange, yellow, green, aqua, blue, purple and magenta. Now hue is sort of like, think of it like the colour. It's the colour, but why I'm hesitant to just say colour is because light blue, for example, like light blue of the sky, you know, that's probably somewhere in between the blue and the aqua, right? In terms of the hue. So the colour is light blue, but the hue is sort of the base colour, if you like. Or I guess it's the wavelength of light. You can think of it like that. Or, no, even that's not good, because magenta is not a wavelength of light. Magenta is the colour that our brain makes up when we see red and blue together, basically. If we see red and blue reflecting at us, our brain goes, hey, that's magenta. But there's no actual frequency of light that's magenta. So why would you want to adjust the hue? Apart from making corrections, from an artistic or creative standpoint, you might want to adjust the hues to focus the colours onto certain things. So, yeah. So what I've done here is I've sort of shifted, and again, you want these to sort of, you probably want these to be smooth. You don't want one going that way and another one going that way, because that can create some weird looks. And probably don't want to go too extreme, but yeah, you can see I've sort of made the yellows a little bit. So I should mention that when you're adjusting the yellow, and you, for example, when you're going either way, you're going, if you're going left, you're going towards the previous one, so orange, or if you're going right, you're going towards the following one, so green. In the case of magenta, then the following one would be red, or red, the previous one would be magenta. So I've sort of pushed the yellows a bit more towards orange, and the greens a bit more towards yellow. Aqua's a little bit more towards green, blue's a little bit more towards aqua. So it's really, so we see the greens here. I don't want the green, I'm saying I want the greens to be a little bit more yellow-ish to continue with the theme of the early morning. And it's a good question to pose in this discussion, which is, what are you trying to do? For me, I'm trying to recreate the memory of that photo. Now, I like to use the example of a sunset. If you've got a modern smartphone, now Rod, you may or may not relate, because a camera, a little digital camera, would exhibit the same sort of behaviours, but it's most obvious, I think, with people who own smartphones. You see a really awesome sunset that's just absolutely magnificent. So you get your phone out, take a photo of it, because it's just such a good sunset. And you look at the photo, you know, as you're taking it on the sunset, looks great. Fantastic. Then, you know, you get home and the next day you're talking to people and you say, hey, did you see the sunset last night? Wasn't it amazing? Everyone goes, oh yeah, you know, I saw it, that was great. Someone says, oh no, I didn't see it. Did you get a photo? Yeah, I did. Oh, cool. And you show the photo and you go like, oh, it's just not as good as I remember it, you know? Like it's there, you can see it, but it doesn't quite do it justice, you know? And that's probably because the camera is being accurate. Now, that's all well and good. Your brain is not accurate. Your memory has been enhanced. Your vision of colours, because, you know, a sunset is, you know, you felt a lot of positive emotions, say, when you were viewing the sunset. So your brain sort of viewed the world through rose-coloured glasses, if you like. It enhanced the colours. That's how our brains work. The intensity of colours and whatever that we see changes depending on how we're feeling at the time. So my photos, while I don't want them to be false or misleading, I am not necessarily going for what's perfectly accurate. I'm not looking for someone to accurately reproduce a colour of paint, for example, from my photo. Now, you know, there's arguments to be made for, you know, historical purposes that you try to, you know, if, for example, your photo was the only photo that ever existed of a particular colour, then, yeah, it would be historically inaccurate. But my theory is I hope to one day upload all my photos to some sort of archive, and that will be the raw photos. So what I'm putting out in the meantime, that's the my interpretation, if you like. And eventually when I get my hands on good archive and everything uploaded and whatever, you can download the raw and you can go have a play with it yourself if you want accuracy and whatnot. But yeah, there's so many things that can affect the colour, the exact colour of the image, even just not even talking about the brain, just talking about like the physical mechanism of the camera. For me, I'm looking to invoke the memory, if you like. What are we doing for time? 10:04, okay. I don't think we'll go too late tonight. So yeah, playing around with the hue can just sort of help enhance different colours. Similar with the saturation and the luminance, except obviously the saturation is just playing around with how saturated is the reds, how saturated is the yellows, etc. And luminance, pretty obvious. What may not be so immediately obvious is that the luminance can sort of affect the saturation in a way. And by that I mean, if a colour is brighter, it tends to be less saturated, and if a colour is darker, it tends to be more saturated. So yeah, bear that in mind when you're looking at the luminance slider. Colour grading, I don't do a whole lot of this, but yeah, you can either with 3 wheels separately like that, or individually, shadows, midtones, highlights. Essentially, it's affecting the midtones, the shadows and the highlights, but you're putting a certain colour hue to it or adjusting it. So let's say I wanted to make the midtones a little bit more bluish, you know, or looking somewhere around there. I could, you know, like if I wanted to make it really blue, then that's that. Or yeah, something around there. Or, you know, the highlights, maybe I want the highlights to be quite warm, so, you know, putting that in there. I mean, it takes a lot of more fiddling, and that's a lot of photo editing is just fiddling to get it to a place where you want, and it's not a bad idea if you want to get into this sort of stuff to read up or watch up on some colour theory. So that's sort of the science of what colours work together. If you've ever heard of things like complementary colours, then that's an example of colour theory. You know, triadic. There's a whole bunch of theories of which colours work best together. Because, yeah, colours is a science as well as an art, you know, there's a bit of both. Blending and, so yeah, that's affecting the colour and that's affecting the brightness. And then blending is sort of like, what do you want the transition to be from what Lightroom considers the highlights to the midtones to the shadows? Do you want it to be, if it's 0, then it's a pretty harsh transition, and if it's 100, then it's a pretty soft transition, or you can go in between and it's a medium transition. Balance, that's talking about at what point does it consider to be the middle? Is it at 50%? Or is it at a bit more than 50%? Is it a bit less than 50%? So, you know, that'll affect things. Sharpness. This is the sharpness amount slider. So, do you want to add in, do you want to sharpen your image a little bit? Don't go too far with the sharpness slider. In fact, might even say I've gone too far there. Just, you can look into here, which is like a little window, it shows you how much sharpness you want. Because if you go to the extreme, then you might, again, it's easy when you first start editing to just put things to the extreme and go, wow, that makes such a difference. Big difference equals great. But no, not necessarily. Just add it until it looks just right. So I'd say, you know, somewhere about there. And you're probably not getting the full quality on YouTube. You're not seeing what I'm seeing. But even so, it'll take time to develop an eye for it. Radius, that's just part of the sharpening algorithm, sort of saying so the sharpening algorithm is sort of looking for lines. And how does it look for lines? It looks for high levels of contrast between different, you know, one or more pixels. So sort of saying like if you took one pixel in the middle, what radius around that pixel is it looking for lines to be contrasty, to sharpen, you know? And so we've got it, you know, somewhere medium, which is like 1.4 pixels. So, you know, a little bit, but not too much. Detail, that's sort of just, yeah, adjusting how much detail it picks up on, because there's going to be a little bit of noise in the image, which is sort of, I guess, digital camera inaccuracies. We can talk about noise another time. Masking, if you hold down Option, you can see this is the mask that it's creating. So the white parts, it's going to affect sharpness, and the black parts, it's not. So it's really just a way of you refining the lines a bit more to say, okay, yeah, I want it to try and sharpen the lines around where there's actually lines, but I don't want it to try and sharpen the tender reflection, for example, too much. Noise reduction. Luminance slider is saying how much of luminance noise you want reduced. My camera is pretty good, so 7 is more than enough. Or even, I mean, it produces bugger all noise at ISO 100, but yeah, I don't know, it's just something to play around with. Detail, it's looking at, yeah, how much detail is it keeping. Contrast, it's just another way of adjusting the noise reduction algorithm. This is the one slider I do put up to 100% all the time, every time. And that's the color noise reduction. The reason why you wouldn't necessarily want to put other sliders up to the max is because why not just pump this luminance noise reduction? Why not get it to just eliminate all the noise in our image? Because it will eliminate more than the noise. It will start to eliminate the signal as well. So it'll start to really affect the quality of the image. But yeah, color, for some magical reason, and I'm not complaining, the algorithm that they use, that Adobe has figured out to remove color noise, so inaccuracies on the pixel level of what color it thinks it detected versus what color it should have actually been detecting. Yeah, you see negligible reduction in image quality, and it removes all of the color noise, or almost all of it from your image. Detail and smoothness, again, just affecting like the color noise reduction algorithm, how much it takes out. But I just usually leave that on default. Lens corrections. Beauty of having Lightroom and a good camera is that, well, the good camera doesn't have too much to correct to begin with, but all cameras, no matter how expensive, will have some level of imperfection. So chromatic aberration, what's that? If I turn that off, let's see if we've got it at all. We don't really. What I was looking for is just sort of looking at the leaves, and I was looking at looking for if there was like a green edge on one side and a magenta edge on another, or something like that. Especially the lower quality lenses can have a lot of chromatic aberration, and the reason it occurs is basically when your lens is bending the light, it's a natural phenomenon of physics that different wavelengths of light get bent in slightly different amounts. So one lens element might bend red light more than it bends blue light. And another lens might bend blue light more than it bends red light. And yeah, it's the job of a lens designer to put in different elements within the lens so that that is all corrected for. But it's something that's sort of unavoidable. Yeah, so it's worth just ticking that and it gets rid of it for you for the most part, unless it's extreme. But you know, it can just often occur in these sort of high contrast areas. But moral of the story is I've got a very good lens, so there's basically none. Enable profile corrections, so that's correcting for any distortion of the lens and any vignetting that the lens naturally has. So if I turn that off, you can sort of see how that has affected things. It really just corrects for that, makes all the lines straight, removes any vignetting. It does that by, it's basically people in labs have tested, and Sony has put out or Adobe has put out these profiles that basically tell the software that, you know, this is the make and model of lens, and for this lens setting, this is how much vignetting and distortion occurs, and so then you can essentially apply the opposite of that to correct for it. But if you wanted to add in a little bit of distortion for yourself, just as a creative decision for one reason or another, you could. Same with a bit of vignetting, although yeah, there's mainly calibrating for the lens. Yeah, if you wanted to do vignetting, you'd come down here to effects. Transform, if your photo is a little bit off in terms of its dimensions and lines, then you can adjust that. So vertical, woohoo, you know, you can play around with that. And constrain crop just means like, I'll turn that off. So you see, if I made like an extreme adjustment, you can see that there's these white areas where, you know, it's trying to correct for it. And this isn't a good example because this photo I took the time to take it level and whatnot. But if you wanted to correct it, you could. But you know, these white areas are a bit yucky, so we can constrain the crop so that, you know, we don't see that. Anyway, let's go back. Roderick says, I'm wilting badly and won't survive after 10:30 when lens correction reigns supreme to fix parallax. Yes. Yeah, lens corrections are are good. You just tick the box and it does the rest for you, because other people have done the hard work for you. So yeah, you can change the style of vignette and do either a white or a black vignette. It's just, yeah, play around with that and you'll see what each of the stuff does. But I don't do a lot with vignetting, so I'm not going to talk about that too much. Grain is just adding in sort of fake film grain, if that's something that you desire as a creative effect, and you can make the grain bigger or smaller and make it a bit rougher or smoother, you know. Play around to your heart's desire. But it's not something that I usually do. Calibration here is, again, you can play around with it to get creative and, you know, like, whoa, look at that, you know, that's very false colours, but, you know, if that's the look you're going for, then who am I to stop you? It was intended to be more of a corrections thing than a creative thing, but the tool's there, so you might as well use it. I used to use it a little bit, but then my style sort of changed. I felt like I could get a better style using all of the rest of it. So yeah, I mean, we can go back. This is my final edit after playing around with it in my own time. And just I'll just scroll through slowly, and you can get an idea for what adjustments I made and how the photo turned out. Didn't do anything on effects or calibration. So yeah, that's that. That's how I would, it's what all the sliders and everything does. And yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily adjust every slider every time. That's why I've got my presets, because it's already done the bulk of the work, and I just sort of look at the presets as a good starting point and then adjust things from there. Just make, you know, little adjustments here and there depending on the exact photo. I guess while I'm at it, I can show you a quick before and after, because that's always fun. So there you go, that's before, and that's after. Oh, actually, I will just quickly talk about local corrections. This can be a corrective thing or it can be a creative thing. It's mainly a creative thing for me. So what you can do is you can create these masks where you're only making some adjustment, whatever adjustments you can see here. You only want to make those to part of the image. So for example, I've got a mask here, which is a linear gradient. So essentially, if we show the overlay, you can see the red parts is what it's affecting, and the other parts is what it's not affecting. So it varies from affecting completely to not affecting at all. And so I've drawn that linear gradient and said I want to make that darker. because I felt like, see, can we, yeah. So if we just turn the visibility off, you can see, looking at that image, the wheels are quite bright and it sort of distracts you a bit. So if I turn that back on, then the wheels are darker and your eyes are sort of more attracted to this middle of the image, which is what I want. Similar thing with the sky. I'm just making that, looks like I've increased the contrast a bit, the sort of upper part of the image, and I've also made it a little bit cooler. So decreased the white balance a little bit. And then this is a radial mask, so I'm just affecting the A2 and a little bit of the T, and looks like I've just made it a little bit more contrasty. So yeah, you can do all kinds of adjustments. You can, you know, do white balance, you can make it brighter, darker, more saturated, change the hue if you want. You know, play around and watch. If you really want to get deep into this stuff, the way that I learned was basically just watching a whole bunch of photography editing tutorials on YouTube. Oh, what's the guy's name? I think Martin Schrader, something like that, on YouTube. He's got a good YouTube channel where he's basically taking an Instagram photo. People send him Instagram photos, and then he sort of recreates that look in Lightroom and shows you what size is adjusting by how much in order to create a certain look. And it can just help to give you an idea of how they all interact with each other in the end. Yeah, and you can adjust this this feather. So if I, whoops, let's go show overlay. So this is sort of how soft or hard you want the mask to be. So no feathering would be, yeah, look, that's pretty harsh, a pretty harsh line. And let's take that off. So, you know, look, honestly, that doesn't look too bad, but you'll often find that no fall off means you'll have a bit of a line appearing in your image that you don't want. So that's where you can use the feather to make it smoother. So if I go this, and you can see it's varying from 0 to 50 roughly to 100%. You know, just depends. Like, you want it to be affecting things, but you also want a good fall off. You don't. The goal is to make my goal in editing is to evoke the memory without making it overtly obvious that the photo has been edited. Now, if you sort of take a moment to think about it, then of course it's edited. There's lots of signs pointing to it, but just the first initial glance, it doesn't scream, I've edited this photo. Yeah, so that's what masking can do, and that's what that tool is. Cropping, I mean, that's fairly obvious. That's, you know, changing the size of the photo, changing the aspect, whatever you want to do. Spot removal, that's good for I mean, let's just say you can see this spot on the wheel. It'll probably get rid of it if I just click on that and close. Yeah, I mean, that wasn't the best example, but actually I've got a good example. So I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's these faint but still present dust spots here that is dust on my camera sensor. So I can use this spot removal tool, just click on the dust spots, and it's taking a sample of another part of the image and sort of blending that in and getting rid of the dust spots for me. So now the dust spots no longer exist. Hey, isn't that cool? Yeah, it can just be good for removing small things. You could even go as far as to, if you really wanted, you can like try to remove the power line. There you go, that's not a bad job. Obviously in this case I don't want to, but just something that you could do. Yeah, I think that's about it. So I would usually, if I haven't sorted the photos, then I'll sort of just go through and pick one at a time to edit, and edit it and then do something with that photo or whatever. But yeah, I'll sort these photos out another time off camera. Looks like we won't be sending them to Noah today after all. Roderick says, there is a huge difference between our engineering photography and photography of people. Is there a reverse vignette tool so that you can repair scans of old family album photos? Yeah, so it's the same tool, and I know, Rod, you use Photoshop. Photoshop would have the same. So if we go down to effects, so this is the post-crop vignetting. So if I go this way, then it's creating a traditional black, dark vignette, right? But if I go the other way, it's creating a white vignette. So if you've got an old family album photo that's got quite a heavy vignette already, like let me just try and recreate that, for example. Yeah, not really letting me. Oh, well, you get the idea that you could essentially use the white to, because what it's doing is it's just brightening that area. So you could use it to reverse a old family photo. But yeah, most of my photo editing is with photos that come out of the camera that are already good. They're already, or at least not bad, not too bad. So I'm not doing much corrective photo editing so much as I'm doing creative photo editing. Whereas I know you, Rod, do more corrective than creative. Let me just have a think about if there's any good final example that I want to show. If we just go here, I'm looking for a specific photo. I don't know if I've done stuff to it yet or not. No, I was looking at like one of these or something, but no, that's all right. I think I've got a good photo in mind. Let me just think about what to search. It's in like maybe 2017 trains. It wasn't the Swan Hill Overlander, it was something else. Maybe it was 2016. Just need something to jog my memory. Malden Experience, I think that's it. Yes, that's the photo I was looking for. So here's a photo which got put onto the front cover of a steam rail calendar one year. I never received a calendar because I never followed it up, basically. I was away, I got invited to the ceremony or whatever to be presented a calendar, free calendar, because I had my photo on the front. But then I was busy on that day for some reason, and then I never ended up chasing one up, so whatever. If I find one lying around the workshops one day, I'll nab it. But I don't really mind. So this is just an example of another photo where I've done a fair bit. So this is, and I've done a bit of actually correcting. So this was the original, right? And I saw it and I thought it has great potential because I've got a nice sort of magenta-y, orangey sunset reflection off the top here, but I've got this ugly green cast here from the ugly lights. So I want to turn it into this. So I did all sort of the normal corrections and whatnot, but I also, I've adjusted the white balance a bit, so I've pushed up this tint to get rid of a lot of the ugly green and enhance this sort of sunset colours. Looks like I've made it a little bit cooler to make the sky nice and cool and whatnot. And in terms of like masking, looks like I've got a linear mask here to darken the platform a bit there, and looks like I've just brightened the shadows a bit on the front of this R711, decreased the saturation a bit, put a bit more green tint and a bit more of a blue into it, or really think of that more as taking away the magenta that I previously added over here. So just, I don't know, bringing it back to a more neutral stance. And yeah, you end up with that as the final product. And I also did crop it, so you can sort of see that was the original image. This guy was there, it was a 30-second, no, sorry, it was a 2-second exposure. You can see over here it tells me that it's taken at 10 millimeters, that's on a crop sensor, so think of it as 16 millimeters on a full frame, still quite wide. But yeah, 2-second exposure at f4.5, ISO 800. And you know, the 2-second exposure is good on a creative aspect because, you know, you've got a bit of motion blur of the people and the steam, so it just creates a more dreamy effect. And yeah. Roderick says, did you also have to allow space for the cover lettering? What do you mean? The cover lettering. So yeah, I'm always, as I said before, I'm starting with a preset and then modifying it as I see fit. Oh, for the calendar, yes. Short is the short answer. Now, I didn't submit that crop to Eddie. What did I do? So yeah, I think that's the crop that I submitted. Oh, it's a bit of an outdated version by the looks of it, but oh, what have I done? Yes. Okay. I don't know. But, yeah, so I cropped it to crop out the person for Eddie. And yeah, allowed space for the title and whatnot. But I preferred this vertical crop in the end, just when I'm publishing the image on my own. So yeah. Oh, and it's also worth mentioning that it was cropped at a 4:5 aspect ratio. Also might be known as an 8:10. And that was because that's the maximum vertical aspect ratio that Instagram allows. So that's why I chose that. Plus it looks good. But yeah, I might, you know, in fact, you know, I could do this now. I could change this and go crop to a 16:9 aspect ratio. If I wanted it to be a phone background, that looks all right. So, yeah, that's the 4:5 crop. Anyway, 10:44. I'm tired. I think everyone else is. What are we doing in 2 weeks? Good question. I could do a strictly 1 hour slideshow. Otherwise, I'm probably going to be pretty busy. We'll see, but I hope to be able to do yeah, something like that. a slideshow of something, or yeah. I still do want to at some point get into bringing a few guests on. But yeah, unless Les is easy to organise, may or may not be, I'll have to talk to him, then you probably just default to a slideshow. Okay, because yeah, I'm getting into exam time and assignments are galore and everything. Yeah, it's pretty intense, but that's life. So thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next live stream in 2 weeks' time, hopefully. See you then. Bye-bye.